So today is Saturday, December 12th, 2015, and you are at the effect of game addiction on queers. My name is Daniel Villarreal. I am the editor of unicornbooty.com. We're one of the media sponsors. I'm also a writer, been working in LGBT journalism for over about a decade now, and from Texas. So we're going to cover a lot of ground in this panel. Panel of one. And so just know that. But if for those who are really, really hungry for all the information and all my notes, we can get it out to you some way via email or something else like that. So the reason I became interested in this topic is basically I got addicted to hookup apps more or less. And like I didn't go to rehab or anything for it, but like I was on fucking apps like all the time. And like finally one day I had something like 4 or 5 hookups like scheduled or whatever, such that it was just like inconveniently, stupidly impossible to do. And I was like, why am I even doing this? Like at this point, it's not even about the pleasure of actually like sticking my dick into something. It's literally just like I'm compulsively doing it because I cannot stop. And so, you know, I was like, I can't be the only one who's dealt with this. And this has to apply to a lot more than just me and, you know, and my wiener. So that's where this talk came out of, my wiener. So just so you know, in this talk, we're going to be using a really wide definition. Oh, sorry, I have to change this. We're going to be using a really wide definition of games. All right, and so that fast and loose definition is basically any program that rewards your repeated participation. It basically incentivizes your participation. All right, and so that includes most internet websites, mobile applications, but you're going to see that as we talk, pretty much anything in life can be considered a game by this definition. And so we're gonna be talking mostly about apps and games, but we'll have a few more explanations. You'll understand why those are important. Part of the reason this is important is I don't know if anyone here has watched Darren Aronofsky's Pi. The guy's a genius. Pi is a black and white film, I think released somewhere around 2000. And in it, there's this mathematician who basically realizes that pi, the Greek theorem for getting the circumference of a circle, or whatever, he finds out that is also the secret name of God and also some code to breaking the stock market. It's a great film. The guy's a freaking genius. Anyway, in it, he basically says that anything can be quantified into numbers, and that the entire world can be understood by numbers, even seemingly random things like the Chinese game of Go. Supposedly, Go represents the Earth, and the moves and the populations of your pieces on there kind of represent your own dynasty and your own will imposed on the board, right? The idea is that Go is supposed to be infinite in its variety. No two games are said to be the same. But the point that Max, the hero of the movie Pi, makes is that, but if you were to study every single game of Go over a larger amount of time, you would be able to quantify the possible moves made, which reduces, you put more and more tiles on the board, and you would be able to sort of mathematically know and make a lot of predictions on what's going to happen in that game. Just so you know, he ends up, well, I won't spoil it, but you know, things don't end up so great for Max. Yeah, so there's this idea that, you know, we can quantify any sort of experience and end up kind of turning a game out of it. The second thing I want to highlight really quickly is that this talk is going to leave some people out. That is, like, I tried to make it as inclusive as possible, but if you find that I'm not representing your community or your concern, we'll have some time for questions at the end. Please point it out. I do this talk every year, and I try to make it better and better every year. Okay, so if everything's a game, let's see at some of the games that all of us play. The work economy. Okay, so jobs. The longer you work, the more you sell, the more money you get, the higher up you go. In Super Mario Brothers, the more you play, the more coins you get. Got to earn that coin. Maybe you can get an extra life, huh? So you get your day job and you got your nightlife. You get to see new worlds. Ooh, some travel, right? And maybe you'll meet a nice princess or a toad, you know? And yeah, cool. Another game that we regularly play, the sex game. All right, we use stats all the time in sex. So in pro sports, baseball fans are obsessed with their favorite players. On a hookup site, we're obsessed with our favorite players. And we check out their stats, their size, their shape, their age, their skills, special moves. And the fact that sex is often like linked with sports metaphors is showing that these two things are innately connected. So, you know, you're like, did you score? Did you get a home run? Did you get to first base, second base? Did you put it in their dugout? You know, so they're connected. The other thing is that the interactions tend to be brief, and they tend to be guided by certain rules of what you can and cannot do. So, you know, the behavior and the things that you can do within any sort of program or dating app are pretty limited. And they're often geared towards a very slim range of roles. Even if you're one of these people who is genuinely using Hornet or another app to just chat, friends only, at some point you're probably going to want a picture. At some point you're probably going to want a phone number or an address or to make a plan. You're probably not going to hash out philosophy or some other kind of large grand design using Hornet for a chat. You know, you're gonna try to achieve one of few things to get offline and possibly get off. Anyway, this applies to Facebook and to a lot of other social networks where our worth and validation is quantified in terms of likes and shares and pictures and check-ins and all sorts of other interactions that you can quantify. Another game that we all play, politics, all right? So if you look at a risk map and you look at a map of LGBT rights around the world, they don't look so different, all right? You know, so instead of moving little plastic soldiers from country to country to country, think about the number of activists mobilized or the number of voters, an electoral map. And you can see that what ends up happening is that the rules and borders change depending on how many of your army are within these borders. All right, and they end up affecting culture and tastes and language and behavior and all sorts of things. And so these games, all of the games that we just talked about, are often a matter of actual life or death. All right, so it's not just Candy Crush that we're talking about here. So going back to Max and the idea that any sort of social interaction can eventually be quantified into a number. A good model, I think, for us to think about when doing today's talk is this great quote by a sociology teacher I had. And he said, "We define ourselves by the ties that we keep to others." All right? And so if you want to know who you are, your priorities, what you love, what you're made of, just look at the time and attention that you invest in others, or that you invest in games, or that you invest in yourself, or your work, or anything like that. So the larger your network becomes, the more sorts of inputs you have, the more distractions and demands for your attention. That's who you become. You experience a sort of identity diffusion because you have a lot of roles and demands on who you are and what you do in your time. All right? One of the ways that we try to control this, or some people try to control this, is through self-hacking. All right? There's this idea that if you can gauge and quantify, the relations you keep to yourself and inanimate objects, you can know yourself better. So some people will quantify things like how many calories they eat, say on a dating app or on a dieting app, how long and how well you sleep, how long you're walking or running on a pedometer, how much money you're spending, your general mood for something like mood notes, the number of sexual partners you have, the time spent working, the medications you're on, your other viewing habits. All of these you're supposed to get more and more data because then you can figure out where you're doing things right, where you're doing things wrong. You probably do this to some degree at your own job as well. If you're made to clock into like different departments or things like that, they sort of keep track of what you're getting accomplished over a certain amount of time. And the idea is that they can learn how you're doing it and how you can do it better, faster, quicker, with less money, whatever. Now, the downside of self-hacking like this or self-tracking like this is that, as Einstein said, not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts. Or not everything that can be counted counts. It's a bit too numeric at some degree, right? So for any social outsiders like queers, or any artistic reflective person, you'll find that the world of numbers at some point might leave you cold, all right? Because outsiders and people like queers like us feel like we don't entirely understand ourselves. And so even if you have all that number and all those numbers and all that data, there's still gonna be something kind of essential missing, all right? In this sense, life hacking is kind of like keeping a quantitative journal. Whereas we need introspection to gain a greater understanding of what our motivations really are. And this becomes important later when we talk about the underpinnings of actually curing game addiction and what some rehab centers are doing to help alleviate that. Man, I'm just blazing through this. Okay, so what you can know in a game is limited, right? Even if you're a hacker, you end up basically becoming specialized in one really distinct field. So you could be the best WoW player in the world, but it's probably not going to help you fix your printer when it becomes broken, or it's not going to help you like win an argument with, say, like a loved one, unless you guys are arguing about WoW. You know, so that yet again, it's kind of a limited data set. There's only so much that you can do, even if you become a master at whatever game that you love, whether it's your job or your sex life or you know, or politics or whatever. And yet it's seductive, right? It's really, really seductive. You know, I thought about my relationship to my phone and my computers because I'm always on one or the other. And I'm kind of a misanthrope. Like, I love people, but I don't always like them, right? Because they're annoying. they require time and attention and effort and, you know, stuff that I enjoy spending on myself. And so it can be draining, and it can take a lot out of you. On contrast, computers and phones really allow you to see and do and create so much that, I mean, one day I told someone, I was like, man, I love my laptop more than I love my mom. Because like if my mom could like spell check my articles and like burn me DVDs and illegally download me Hollywood movies and find me porn, like, yeah, great, mom, you're in the running for like best device ever. You know, but you know, she doesn't provide that. She provides something else that a computer can never provide. But I mean, you know, I think we're all kind of similar in this way, where you like leave your home without your phone, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I left my brain at home. Crap, like, and like you suddenly feel as if you're half a person. You know, in reality, we're all kind of cyborgs in this way. We all have this sort of, you know, artificial external brain that we're using to help get our senses out in the world, whether that's communicating with others or communicating over the internet. And so we end up becoming really, really intimate with these devices. I sleep with my phone. All right, like that thing is like really close to me, and that may be kind of gross, but like my alarm is there, and I'm a heavy sleeper. If that thing's not close to me, like it's not gonna work, right? And so like at this point, I've literally slept with a robot more than I've slept with humans, right? And I'm probably not the only one. So the other reason it's so seductive is because, come on, a lot of our friends own tech. This was a study actually done a while ago. It's kind of, you know, who owns what, you know, and they found that, you know, gay men, gay women, and lesbians all own, you know, smart devices to some degree, you know, actually to a really high degree. And all of us are using them for the same thing. So you might not be able to see at the bottom, but, you know, we're all sending text messages, searching the internet, reading news, just doing shopping or finding local businesses, navigating or kind of updating social networks. You look at that, most of the numbers on the bottom, those are above 50%, which means that that's what you're primarily using your phone for all the time. One thing that you will not see on the bottom is calling people. So, you know, your phone isn't even really for, you know, like the friend told me once, he was like, the shittiest thing on the iPhone is the phone. Like the phone sucks. But otherwise it's great. It's a wonderful device. So, you know, so when I mentioned that, you know, we become so dependent on our phones, you know, am I an addict? And this word gets thrown around a lot, right? It's sort of like, oh, I'm so addicted to Cheetos and Netflix. I'm an addict, total addict. So it's important for us to define what that is, because your addiction to Cheetos, it could kill you, but it's probably a bit different than if you feel addicted to, say, games or porn or anything like that. And so there's also a debate of whether game addiction is an actual thing. But just so you know, the word addict didn't originally mean like addicted to crack. It usually meant a devotee, all right? Someone with a deep fondness for something, or who spent a lot of time doing a thing. So it's kind of like a hobbyist in a way. So back in the day, it was more of like, oh yeah, I'm a bird watching addict, right? And in the Victorian age, it was like, ah, yes, that's a good addiction. Congratulations. It was only around the same era, the Victorian era, when people started getting addicted to things like laudanum and cocaine and morphine, that addict began being used as a psychological term for that sort of addiction. All right. Now, part of the reason that we're becoming addicted to gaming and web use is because it allows us to do 4 consistent things, and we'll see these themes repeated as we move forward. One is hyperawareness, and that's kind of your unquenchable thirst for information, right? That could be intellectual or sensory stimulation. Now, geek culture is huge on this, right? It's all about being a wonk or being a fanboy or fangirl, fan person, knowing the most about a game or a TV show or a book or whatever. And it's a sort of cultural, social cachet, right? It's all like, oh, don't tell me, he doesn't even watch Game of Thrones, total poser. Or like, oh, he says he does, but like he's just a Candy Crusher. He doesn't know what's going on. And so, there's a social standing that you get from this by being hyper aware. The second one is socialization, right? So as soon as you start playing a massive multiplayer online game, as soon as you start watching Game of Thrones or whatever your fix is, you're immediately connected to this huge network of other people, right? And you can be all like, oh yeah, that's Sally. She's pretty boring. No, man, she watched Game of Thrones. Oh shit, Sally, come here. Yeah, come here, let's talk. And I mean, also everyone has an opinion on whether or not, that one guy who got stabbed is coming back. He is, duh. That's people who are addicted to social networks as well. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm so connected with all these other people. We share all these interests. It's great. The third one, accomplishment. So you end up kind of in this cycle of never-ending productivity and multitasking, time-crunching tools in a sort of weird game of social one-upsmanship, right? So it's all like, oh man, I sent out like 5,000 emails today, and I talked to like some cat in Japan, and I took all these great photos and I shared them, and I got 5,000 likes. And so it's this weird immediate sense of accomplishment. Like you can literally write the word fart on Facebook and just publish that, and like probably at least 10 people will like it, right? And you're like, I did it, yeah, fart, and it works. Like there's a weird dumb feeling. You're like, yeah, I'm good, I'm funny. And then lastly, of course, escape. All right, and so the internet offers more and more options for escaping the stresses of daily life. All right, and that kind of feeds our desire for distraction. Life is largely unpleasant most of the times. As I said, people can be draining. This room is a little bit cold. I have to go pee. I would love any number of things to distract me from all of the other stresses that I have. And a game or a social network is a really fantastic way to do that quickly. So you get people who are asking, they're like, oh, social media, it's just making us unhappier because you're so disconnected from people and you spend all your time. Actually, that's kind of bullshit, and we're going to explain why. The research that's been done on social media thus far finds that people overwhelmingly, or at least more than half, think that it has a positive effect. So you'll see here it has the benefits of keeping you in better touch with your distant friends and acquaintances, helping you know the friends and acquaintances that you have nearby even better, getting you in touch with more people, and getting you to enjoy people even more. All right, and so largely, if you're using social networks to help increase the types of relationships you have with people, not just for gaming and not just for your own adulation, but to connect with other people, the reaction is generally pretty positive, that it has a beneficial effect. And yet, there are those who accurately say that it's also a real drag. So in this study, we're looking at less than 25% of the responses in this study, but there was an agreement that doing anything with family, agreeing that family and friends doing fun, interesting things on social media without them makes them feel lonelier and more isolated. All right, and that seeing other people's accomplishments creates anxiety, right? And so you may have heard of this kind of condition called FOMO, or consider yourself a FOMO-sexual. And FOMO is like fear of missing out. And so there's this idea that someone's posting their car, or they're checking in at a place or whatever, and you're always hooked into social media, and you're all like, I wish I had a car. I wish I was there. Right? And it can be really alienating and make you feel like you're not really a success at all. And then this last 21% said that using social media can turn your good mood into a bad mood, right? Like, oh, I was in such a good mood today, and someone posted all this crap about, the Republicans, and I hate Facebook. That's bullshit. And here's why, is that a study has actually shown that rather than dictate your mood, like don't get me wrong, when you find out on social media that like your father died, probably a bummer. You can blame social media, I guess, for that one. But they've actually found that social media is more of an amplifier for how you feel rather than a dictator of how you feel, right? So if you feel depressed and suicidal and you go onto social media, it's probably just going to make you feel worse. There's some mornings I get up and like I'm kind of a depressed person, and I just see like all this shit about the hairpiece that shall not be named, and I just like I hate that shit, and like it's infuriating, and I'm just like and I have to block it out because I don't want to see that shit. But that's me. That's because I'm an irritable person, and because like I woke up kind of already ready to be cranky because I hate mornings and waking up and work. But But on the converse, if you ever get on Facebook and you're already kind of jazzed to be there, and you see something about like evil shit going on in the world, you'd be like, oh, that's too bad, because life's otherwise pretty great, and you'll go and you'll find that kitten or whatever's going to make you happy, that animated GIF. So one other thing that I want to talk about in terms of negative reinforcement for these studies is a recent study of 319 college undergrads, and this was in the Journal of Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Networking, found that multitasking actually bums you out. So it was students who multitasked ended up finding 25% increase in general anxiety and depression. All right, and so what's weird is they did this study to see if it was like, oh, well, is it that people are combining too much media? So if you're listening to a song while watching a movie, or you watch a lot of movies or listen to a lot of songs or play a lot of video games, that's what makes you depressed? And they were like, no. Actually, that doesn't have the same effect. The effect is multitasking. And so it's, trying to kind of juggle a million balls or spin, 20 plates at the same time. It really stresses you out. So I actually really enjoyed knowing this about social media, because I used to get on and just be like, it bums me out. It makes me feel pissed off. And it's nice to know that it's like, no, it's you. It starts with you. And if you go on there and you feel worse about it, you should probably stop for a while and be like, oh, no, it's not social media. It's me. Disconnect, whatever. But, is game addiction even real? I mean, come on. Isn't that just something that, the newscasters talk about, whenever they find some, Korean student at a game cafe for 88 hours and they haven't eaten or slept? It's not even in the Diagnostical Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Well, it is actually. It's in section 3 in the appendix of the most recent version. And actually, what's weird is it was really, really close to getting in as a full-fledged diagnosis. I think it was what they called it was internet or computer addiction. Right? And what's funny is when gaming addiction was first written about, it was actually written about by a psychologist who was sort of like, oh, this will be awesome. Because it was around the time video games were becoming more popular. He was like, I'll just take gambling studies and basically search and replace the word gambling for video games. And people ate it up. They were like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. Yeah, it's a thing. The problem with that, apart from being kind of a shitty joke, is that gambling addiction and game addiction are not exactly the same things, all right? If you spend all of your time on Candy Crush, your family's probably not going to go hungry, all right? And so the stakes are just completely different. Now, the reason that it didn't become a full-fledged addiction in the Diagnostical Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is because it's actually a relatively new field, all right? Only over the last decade or so have psychological studies been done to increasingly quantify and get more and more of a data set. And so the DSM folks won't just throw in anecdotal research. They need good hard numbers and both qualitative and quantitative data before they're going to throw something in there. All right. And so let's see. Yeah. Oh, one other thing is it's also hard to quantify how much gaming is too much, right? Oh, I gamed for 18 hours today. Was it your day off? Yep. Cool. How far'd you get? That's rad. I game 18 hours every day. I haven't showered in a month. It's oh shit. That was okay on Saturday. It's like Tuesday. So it's really hard to kind of know where to draw that line. So how does addiction work? We're going to get kind of the nitty-gritty of what is the actual psychology of addiction. There's one theory that's an increasingly popular theory that refers to something called limbic resonance. So just so you know, the limbic system is a system connecting the oldest parts of the brain, these little highlighted areas that you see here, the thalamus, hypothalamus, frontal lobe, all of that stuff. Those are considered to be the earliest parts of amoebic reptile evolutionary brain, all right? And so, these are base functions of fight and flight and fucking and fighting, right? And so these are harbored encased in your skull of millions of years evolution. And the limbic system, actually speaking to nurses and doctors, they say that the limbic system is a system we know the least about. because it's so old. All right. And so the limbic system is actually responsible for, it's not only these parts of the brain, but it also connects through your spinal column into something that we call the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is connected to every part of your body, like even parts that like you can't name or know that don't know exist. It's controlling those, and it largely controls what we consider to be involuntary processes, things like breathing, your heart rate. All right, and so it'll control like how dilated your pupils are, how much epinephrine and adrenaline are in your system, whether or not your kidneys work. But it also helps regulate things like your mood and your emotions and other sorts of physiological processes. So you might notice that when you get really stressed out that your muscles begin to get tensed up or whatever. That's largely an autonomic and involuntary response. Yeah, you can train yourself to kind of relax, and that will have a good soothing effect on your mood. But the initial response isn't always automatic. It's conditioned, and you learned it. It is automatic. You learned it, just by living. The thing that you also need to know about the limbic system is it controls the body's reward systems. All right. So this is largely, when we talk about rewards in this case, this is largely the degree to which dopamine and other pleasure chemicals and neurochemicals get released into your bloodstream. All right. Now, this is important to know, because for all the games that we're talking about, both online and off, we're basically turned into sort of a rat inside of a Skinner box. Now, just so you can get a better idea of how this works is inside of a Skinner box, the Skinner box is named after B.F. Skinner, a psychologist during the early 20th century. The rat would be put in a box, and then whenever a green light would come on, the rat would learn to press a lever for food. And the rat would see the green light, and after a while, the rat would learn, like, oh, there's a green light on, I get a food pellet. And it would get a food pellet, and it would, and be like, yay, cool. And then, every now and then, it would show a red light, and then it would electrify the rat, which is horrible. And they would find that they could turn on the green light, and the rat would be like, ooh, food pellet, and hit the lever, and no, they could not make food come out. And the rat would be like, where's the fucking food, right? And keep going. And so it was like, cool, you don't even need to provide the incentive. You can just have a green light, and people will do it. If you reward them initially, they'll keep coming back. You can give them less and less of a reward, and you will keep coming back for that pellet, because we might give you that pellet. Video games do this all the time. A random drop by an enemy, they leave behind a gold or like magic dose or some shit. They don't do it all the time. If you got gold coins and dust all the time, like you'd be like, yeah, this game's easy. They don't. They do it at random, so that you're like, I gotta find that dust. Right? With the punishments, they found that they could do the red light, and the rat would just piss itself. It would just be like, oh shit, I'm gonna be pissed. Right? And they wouldn't even have to get they wouldn't even have to provide the electrocution. The rat would just freak out. All right? And so games offer punishments too. Games is not all coins and magic dust, my friends. Like, they also punish you in other ways, which we'll see. But this learning and this getting the response out of us is a process known as conditioning. Eventually, they started to replace the food pellets with other more compelling things, like cocaine. All right? And they would find that cocaine, that rat would live off cocaine. They could offer cocaine in food, the rat chose cocaine. They could offer cocaine in sex, the rat chose cocaine. All right? And so, like, after a while, if the stimulus is good enough or strong enough, and I'm not advocating cocaine use, I've only done it like twice, it wasn't even that great. If the stimulus is strong enough, you're going to give up other things you used to like. All right? Rats like sex. All right? But not when you're giving them, enough cocaine to kill a mule. So games addict us using all number of food pellets, as it were. All right? So high scores, public recognition. Beating the game, you get a sense of accomplishment and closure. Yeah, I know how that game ends. Role-playing, identity development, right? So back when I was imitating Mistress Bambi in the old AOL chat rooms and getting threatening to punish straight men with my wooden spoon, and getting old-timey dick pics that like downloaded like one byte at like every 5 minutes, I felt great because I wasn't allowed to do that with people in real life. It was a way to help me form my identity. It really fucked me up. Achievements unlocked, right? These are the small allotted rewards that we talked about. Yeah, I think largely they're all like, oh, I got a new sword today. I got a new outfit for my character. And like some of us who don't play those games are like, those people are stupid. Like, they keep going back for shit that's not even real. And it's like, no, it works. Like, it actually works, and it just takes the right game to addict you, and suddenly you will care about getting the right skin or the imaginary sword. Discovery, learning. We actually like learning new stuff. Like, that's been proven. Like, people like learning fun facts and things like that. So in a game, you discover a new level or a new sort of thing, like, oh man, like, it's really gratifying. Dual timers. So dual timers in a game, so you might have one timer say, like, you know, how much time you have to complete a level, and that's the primary timer in a game. But a dual timer is a secondary timer that they get you to kind of keep coming back, right? And so if you've ever played, God forbid, Farmville, then you know exactly what this is, because it's all like, you'll call a friend like, oh shit, I'm not next to a computer, I need you to harvest my crops or they're all gonna rot, you know? Or you go and check, oh, I have to check into this game to get my daily reward, or otherwise I won't get like the magic point or whatever. That dual timer keeps you coming back, and they've actually found there's a certain degree of expectations that you can place on a person in a game that they'll keep responding to, and the more expectations you place, the more they like it. A lot of churches and community service organizations will actually do this with their members. They'll be like, we're really, really glad to have you here. We're going to need you to show up on Sundays, and you're supposed to tithe, and we need someone to help out with our newsletter, and we need this and we need that. And all of a sudden it's like, I'm wanted. I'm a valuable member of this community. Cool. The other club I tried to join, they didn't ask me to do anything. They kind of hated me, and I left because I wasn't involved. But with this, sweet, right? And so there's actually a certain degree where you'll continue to put out so much without getting really much of anything in return other than this kind of feeling of, like, you know, the dual timer. Bright colors and sound. Yes, basic stimulation. We love it. And so games are full of it. Multiplayer. It's building relationships. I've met several people here where they're like, oh yeah, I met this person that I've been talking with for like 10 years. And like, I've never actually met this person. And we finally met here at this conference. And so it was like, that like blows my mind. I don't have any friends like that, but like, it happens. It actually builds long-term relationships. Leveling up. When you level up in a game, it gives you access to so much other cool shit, right? Suddenly you can use spells and swords and talk to the Monkey King and go to like the inverse world and whatever, right? And so there's even infinite more ways to play. I can fly now and I can swim. No saves. If you worked on a game, if you've played a game and like there are no save points or whatever, this is one of the punishments that actually keeps you playing. There are negative things where it's like, crap, like I have to play longer because I have to finish the level. I don't care if it takes an hour, I can't save the game. And you keep coming back. And then lastly, escapism, because, you know, life and work kind of suck sometimes. And so it's just all of these offerings will keep you coming back and will help get you addicted. And almost every game uses some, if not all of these, to help keep you coming back for more. There we go. Another interesting thing about limbic resonance is they found that, oh, sorry, I didn't actually tell you what the hell limbic resonance was. I just explained the limbic system. So the theory of limbic resonance is this, and this is how it connects to game addiction, is that limbic resonance is what it's called when neurochemicals, pleasurable neurochemicals, are released in your bloodstream as a result of human interaction. And I don't mean via Facebook or via Skype. I mean actual face-to-face, person-to-person, three-dimensional, touching, smelling interaction. All right? And so we learn to establish this limbic chemical relationship with people early on. The instant a baby sees a face, they're hardwired in their limbic system to recognize 3 holes. And they're like, you know, because baby's vision is all shitty. But like they see 3 holes and they're all like, oh, that's a face. My brain, oh, I like that for some reason. That's great. A little smiley face, those 2 dots and a little line. You see it's instantly recognizable as a human face. And that seeing a human face actually releases a chemical in the limbic system that's sort of like, oh, human. When I'm able to touch or smell or be close to you or interact with you in other ways, that releases even more. And the more positive interactions I have with this, the more it creates what's called limbic resonance, right? And that's the idea of kind of this, it helps regulate your emotions and your mood in a healthy fashion. That is, like, you actually need human interaction to help create healthy neurochemical functioning. And studies have found that video games and Skype and other types of interactivity don't actually give you that same release of neurochemicals in your limbic system. All right, even if you were able to simulate it. I mean, you know, so you have, you know, 3-dimensional porn. You're like, I can see faces in porn. It's not the same thing, not at all. All right. They say the lack of facial cues and the lack of this sort of limbic resonance, which gets stronger and stronger the more and more you interact with someone, So the limbic fingerprint you have with another person changes depending on your relationship with that person. The more time you spend with them, the stronger and stronger that bond becomes. It's essential, right? Especially between parent and child. But we found that online arguments and misunderstandings online they proliferate so easily because we actually lack limbic resonance. You can't see facial cues, you can't hear tone and inflection, the screen and the text skews cold. And so immediately you saw like, what? Have a nice day. Yeah, you have a nice day, jerk. You know, and it's because you lack that limbic resonance, right? So the reason this is important, knowing about limbic resonance, is because studies have shown that video game levels can double the dopamine levels in your body. You know what else increases dopamine levels in your body by that exact same amount? Sex. All right? And so a lot of video game addiction clinics will actually ask, oh, are you also a sex or porn addict? Because if you think about it, the mechanisms are largely the same. You're putting into a system to try to get out a sort of, rush of neurochemicals and a sort of pleasure and mastery. As we said earlier, there are special moves and levels that you can unlock in order to get kind of, more and more. And so we end up grouping both of these, sex and game addictions, under what are known as arousal addictions. All right, and in sex addiction studies, there's something called the Coolidge effect, named after Calvin Coolidge and his wife, which is really cruel. But it's something that they found in zoological studies, which is that if you put a chimp and its mate together, and even if they're fooling around a lot, humping like monkeys, as they say, after a while, they'll become kind of disinterested in each other. But then you could introduce new mates, right? And suddenly they have an option, we have variety, and then they'll go off and like bonobo chimps, they'll start doing it again. And then eventually that'll get kind of boring. And so you keep introducing more and more new chimps, and they call that the Coolidge effect. That after a while, you're going to get kind of bored with what variety is out there, and you're going to want more and more stimulation. You're going to want more and more, right? Games do the same thing. So it's all of the process and all the kind of tricks they get you to coming back. Opening up new experiences and creating new variety for you ends up curing this Coolidge effect because you're like, cool, there are more chimps, so to speak, in the cage. So I can get on. All right. So as I said earlier, actually figuring out whether you have a game addiction can be kind of troublesome because you can't just be like, oh, how much do you play? I think what's a really good rule is addiction isn't so much about what you do, but what you don't do because of the addictive behavior. All right, and so we see here in the 15 symptoms of internet addiction disorder done by Dr. Hilary Cash, who is a member of Restart, which is an internet addiction recovery program. There are 15 different ways, and I find this important to go through just because you might recognize a little bit of yourself in here. And if you match all 15, you're probably an addict. If you have like a couple of these, maybe not a full-blown addict, but this is a good kind of gut check for you to see, which ones you line up with. So one, you frequently use the internet or game as a means of escaping from problems or relieving your depressed mood, right? You lose track of time while online. Crap, I missed that meeting. Crap, it's my mom's birthday. Oh well. You sacrifice sleep just so you can spend more time doing that. You lie to family members or friends about the time you spent being alone. How many hours did you play today? Oh, just a couple. I didn't shower because I didn't want to. You become irritable if you're not allowed access to the internet, right? I think at one point there was like this video that was going on online where like they snatched away like this like iPad from a baby and the baby got all irate and they were all like, this is proof that our kids are becoming addicted to technology. And I was like, do that to an adult. You'll find the exact same thing, right? Like that's stupid. But you lose interest in activities that you once found enjoyable. You form new relationships with people that you have met online. And so that may not sound negative on the face of it, but like, if, for example, like, I don't know if you've ever had a situation, like, let's say you just have a complete, nerd or gaming friend, and they run into you at the bar at some other local place, and you're hanging out with your longtime bestie, who isn't just your game friend, but also whatever. And all of a sudden, like, your gaming friend's up and like, hey, what's going on? I've seen you a while, and you're all like, oh, it's cool. And I can't talk to you in the context of this other friend, because if you and I talk, we're just gonna geek out about our stuff. So, like, the only relationship I have with you is within the context of this game. And the game can't even combine these two worlds, right? So, like I said, it's limited. So these relationships are good, but these limited. Checks emails several times a day. I like how that's on this list. That's me, totally. Jeopardize relationships, achievements, or educational opportunities because of the internet. A person came and talked to me at the end of my session last year, and he had like a music scholarship, and like was totally gonna be this great like symphonic player, and like had basically dropped out of school, and even his professor, like who was like, oh yeah, you're the wonderkind, was like, I give up, like you're not doing anything. And it broke my heart because I was like, wow, like, you seem like a really nice guy. And who can make music all the time? That's like phenomenal. Disobeys time limits that have been set for internet usage. All right. That's especially important if you're paying for extra lives or something like that in a freemium game. You know, like after a certain point, like Candy Crush will be like, oh, you ran out of lives. You're done. Unless you want to pay more. In which case, you know, I never have because screw that. But eating in front of your computer, that's gross. Don't do that. Your keyboard hates you. Like there are crumbs and shit, and like it's gonna break at some point. So like doing that isn't healthy. And there's like shit on your fingers. What are you doing? Withdrawal symptoms. Do you get like restlessness or anxious or trembling hands after you have like a month or so without internet usage? I recommend people take serious freaking breaks. Like sometimes I will go out without my phone because I'm like, fuck them. Like, you want to get a hold of me? Is my house on fire? You don't need to get a hold of me. You're fine. We're going to be fine. And you just go out and you disconnect. But like, you know, I think it's worth creating that sort of space because, I mean, you'll find yourself like you're always, you feel like your phone buzz, the phantom buzz, right? Where you're like, no one texted you. You just wish someone texted you. It's sad. Preoccupied with getting back online when you're away from the computer. They do it all the time. You know, these little breaks. It's all like, oh shit, I can't wait. And then lastly, trouble distinguishing between the virtual world and the real world. Now that may sound kind of funny. It's all like, life doesn't look like a Super Mario Brothers level. Like, you know, are you like? So this isn't people having a waking, you know, psychedelic trip. These are actual people who are using the gaming interface to interact with others. So for me, going back to sexual addiction and all that, I would see guys as basically just kind of conquests, and it would just sort of be like, oh, do I have the possibility of sleeping with that person? No use to me whatsoever. No need to talk to them. Why would I talk to that guy? I'm not even physically attracted to him. Right, and you end up kind of creating this really slim interface that's really dehumanizing. Right, and so something in gaming studies that's been discussed is whether being isolated from other people kind of creates this insulated view and the depression, or whether people who become addicted to games already had that insulated view and sort of didn't have really great social skills and sort of became addicted as a result of that. So it's a sort of chicken egg thing. Which one came first? So I only have 5 minutes left, so we're going to speed through the rest of this, and then, you know, maybe do we have time for questions or no? No questions? No? Yes? No? No? Ish. Maybe one question. And then you can talk to me afterwards. So yeah, game addiction gets blamed for life's ills like crazy, and you hear this all the time, especially when there's a mass shooting. It's a responsibility of the new Black Ops game that someone gunned down all these people, and like now to be honest, it has been found that media can increase aggression, and children will imitate shit they see on screens, and adults are really not that different. You see all these adults who like got knocked in the wiener by like watching Jackass. That happens, and so like you may think you're above it, but a lot of us aren't. But it also gets blamed for other things too. First, the death of the gay bar. You may have heard this, that like because there are apps like Hornet or like other sort of, you know, kind of social apps that, you know, suddenly it's killed the gay bar, right? Yeah, so did marriage equality and the fact that you don't have to leave home to be accepted by your loved ones or your coworkers or your neighbors. So did the diffusion of gayborhoods and the fact that we live in a lot of other communities because we don't need to go to one gay bar in order to be accepted there either. So did the fact that gay bars suck at marketing and offering added value besides drag queens and booze. So did the fact that like a lot of gay bars are, first off, not open to lesbians or bisexual people or transgender people, but they're also pretty inaccessible financially, racially, gender-wise, age-wise, and disability-wise. And the fact that there's a million other things to do now because of online entertainment rather than go to a freaking gay bar. All right? But the worry is that the death of the so-called death of the gay bar is a symptom of a larger social disengagement, right? And that like if you're not going out, then you're probably not also doing the real-world work that you're going to need to change your own community. So you find a lot of people like this, like, no, I retweeted that meme. I'm doing my political thing. No, I shared that thing. And like, yeah, I made a video about it. I wrote an article about this social cause or whatever. And it's like, that's good. That's really, really important. Did you talk to your local representative? Do you even know what your city zoning plans are? Do you know how your city gets its food? Are you willing to do like the shoe leather work that requires actual face-to-face interaction and stuff that you can't do from your computer to actually change your community? If not, think about it, because it makes a huge difference and it's absolutely necessary. Rising STD rates. You see this all the time. In fact, the hookup apps get blamed for, like, oh, there's more STDs, there's more AIDS, whatever. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation just put up a billboard that like blamed hookup apps for that. And these are kind of cute, fuzzy, STDs that you just want to cuddle up with. But largely, these studies have, while they've shown that there's a definite correlation between apps and the rising STD rates, I think like up to like 25% increase through use of social apps. The United States also has really shitty to non-existent sex education and accessibility to like prophylactics and other things to help keep you safe from these sorts of things. So let's remember to blame that as well. All right. And then we have, kind of the biggest thing that game addiction is blamed for, which is just addicting people and kind of making them ignore the things that they care about. And you'll hear about this all the time. I think there was like a Vietnam province that actually like did a clampdown on like 100 internet cafes to stop, students from going there. Some places have instated a curfew where you literally can't sign into a certain game until after a certain hour. Anyway, the last thing quickly about rehab centers is a lot of them basically get you to disconnect from the media as much as possible. That's largely kind of impossible because of the proliferation of the connectivity we have. But they'll have you do a lot of outdoor labor and working with others to try to reinforce that limbic resonance that we were talking about. And they'll also try to do a lot of talk therapy where they're kind of like, hey, cool, I know you like that game and I know you like playing it, that's why you play it so much. But like, what else is going on in your life? And what are the sort of underlying things that might be causing you anxiety so that we can start to really work on those. So if you're a game addict or you know someone you think is a game addict, trying to get them away from the monitor and talk to them about those issues is really the best way to start. And let's just take one a question if anyone has one. Yeah, please.
I wonder if for addiction, it's a lot like the Kinsey scale for gay orientation, right? Can you be like a 1-point addiction or a 10-point addiction, somewhere in a scale like that? Is there any studies like that?
There isn't yet, actually, and that would actually, I would be surprised if that's not going to be something that we see relatively soon. Because, like I said, I'm relatively addicted to, say, like a hookup app on my phone, or checking emails and making sure things haven't exploded at work. But another sorts of things, like I don't give a fuck about Candy Crush. I'll play that shit when I want to. And so I think the addiction varies from person to person. Absolutely. Any other questions? Sure.
Do you think there's something particular about the queer community that makes us more susceptible to addiction?
Yes. The fact that we're isolated and ostracized from other sorts of places, so like I said, whether it's based on your race or your gender expression or your kind of sexual interests or whatever, it can be really, really isolating. And so for me, and I think a lot of other queers, and Sean Howell from Hornet yesterday said this at his panel, we found people like us online. That was one of the first places we were able to find other people that shared our interests. And so that immediately creates an isolating effect altogether. And if the computer is your first way into that world and is starting to feel accepted, you're coming back. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming to the talk. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me. You can also find me on Twitter at HispanicPanic79, where I'll be sitting at the Unicorn Booty booth in the expo hall. You are beautiful people. Have a great time.